You're the biggest disappointment I've ever had." Emily's words hung in Dr. Craig Young's beige office like smoke from a house fire. The therapist's pen paused mid-scratch on his yellow notepad. Outside, rain pelted the windows of his downtown Millbrook practice, each drop echoing the silence that followed my wife's declaration. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I looked at Emily sitting across from me on the matching leather couch, her perfect yoga instructor posture rigid with contempt. 15 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage, and countless shared dreams reduced to this moment in a room that smelled like vanilla candles and broken promises. "Fair enough," I said. That's it. 2 words. No defense, no counterattack, no desperate plea for reconciliation, just acknowledgement. The therapist's eyebrows rose slightly. Emily blinked, clearly expecting more fight from me. "That's all you have to say?" she demanded, her voice carrying that sharp edge I'd grown to recognize over the past year. "I just told you that you're a complete failure as a husband and you say, 'Fair enough'?" I shrugged, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. "What would you like me to say, Em? That you're wrong? We both know that's not true." Dr. Young cleared his throat. "Mark, how does it feel when Emily expresses her disappointment?" "Like relief," I answered honestly. "Like finally hearing something true in this room." Emily's face flushed red. She'd expected me to crumble, to beg, to promise to change. Instead, I felt the last thread of whatever had been holding us together snap cleanly. There was clarity in that moment, sharp as broken glass. "I think," I continued, standing up slowly, "that this session is over." "We have 20 minutes left," Dr. Young protested. "No, we don't." I looked at Emily one last time. "You wanted honesty in therapy? Here it is. You're absolutely right. I am a disappointment. To you. But that's okay because you've been a disappointment to me for longer than I care to calculate." I walked to the door, then paused with my hand on the handle. "Thanks for the clarity, Em. Really. It's the most honest thing you've said in months." The rain soaked through my jacket as I walked to my car, but I didn't hurry. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Where are you going?" I typed back, "Home, to pack." By the time I reached our colonial on Maple Street, I'd made 3 decisions. First, I was done fighting for a marriage that had been over longer than either of us wanted to admit. Second, I was moving out tonight. Third, I was going to find out exactly what Emily had been hiding behind all that disappointment and anger. Because here's the thing about being called a disappointment by someone you've loved for 15 years, it makes you wonder what they've been comparing you to. I packed methodically. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and the few personal items that actually mattered to me. Emily's yoga bag sat on the kitchen counter where she'd left it before our appointment. I'd never snooped before. Trust had been important to me. But trust was another casualty of this afternoon. Inside the main compartment, beneath her water bottle and meditation journal, I found what I wasn't looking for but somehow expected. A second phone. A cheap prepaid smartphone that Emily had never mentioned. The screen lit up with a simple swipe. No password protection. Emily had always been careless with technology. The message history made my stomach drop and my resolve harden simultaneously. "Jake. Can't wait for this weekend. Booked us the suite at Lakeside Resort." Emily. "Mark will be at his conference. We'll have the whole weekend." Jake. "Good. I'm tired of sneaking around. When are you going to tell him?" Emily. "Soon, after I get what I need from the divorce." The timestamps showed this conversation happened 3 days ago. I scrolled up, finding months of messages, photos I didn't want to see, and plans that made my chest tight with rage. But it wasn't just the affair that made my hands shake as I read. It was the casual cruelty in how they discussed me. Emily's complaints about my boring job at the advertising agency, my pathetic attempts at romance, my complete lack of ambition. Jake's responses were worse, calling me a loser and joking about how easy it would be to upgrade Emily's life. The final message was from this morning, before our therapy session. Going to end it today. Wish me luck. Jake had responded, "You've got this, babe. He'll be better off without you anyway." I screenshotted everything, forwarded the images to my personal email, then carefully placed the phone back where I'd found it. Emily would never know I'd seen it, at least not yet. I left a note on the kitchen table. "Be well, Emily. You win." Then I drove to the Driftwood Inn, Millbrook's only decent hotel, and checked into a room with a view of the harbor. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was staying 3 blocks from the lakeside resort, where my wife planned to spend the weekend with her boyfriend. My phone rang as I was settling into the stiff hotel armchair. Emily. "Mark, what the hell is this note supposed to mean?" "It means exactly what it says. You wanted me gone, so I'm gone. You wanted honesty about our marriage, so here it is. We're done." "You can't just leave. We have kids, a house, responsibilities." "We have kids who are away at summer camp for 2 more weeks. We have a house that you can keep. And my only responsibility right now is to myself." Silence stretched between us. Finally, Emily's voice came back smaller, uncertain. "Mark, if this is about what I said in therapy, it's not about what you said. It's about what you meant." I looked out at the harbor, where fishing boats bobbed in the evening light. "You were right, Em. I am a disappointment, but not for the reasons you think." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I disappointed myself by staying in a marriage where my wife thinks so little of me, but that's over now." I hung up and turned off the phone. Tomorrow I'd call a lawyer. Tonight, I was going to plan exactly how to handle the Jake situation. Because Emily might have been right about me being a disappointment, but she was about to learn that disappointing and defeated are 2 very different things. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Instead of heading to Morrison and Associates, where I'd spent the last decade creating ad campaigns for local businesses, I drove to Richie Torino's auto shop on the south side of town. Richie had been my college roommate, the kind of guy who could fix anything with an engine and had a network of cousins who could fix everything else. When I explained the situation over coffee and the smell of motor oil, his response was predictably direct. "Jesus, Mark, Emily's been screwing around. I always thought she was too good for you, but not in a cheating way. More like a, why's she with this advertising nerd way?" "Thanks for the pep talk. Hey, I'm just being honest. But this Jake guy, real estate developer, right? Drives that ridiculous red BMW?" Richie wiped his hands on a greasy rag. "Yeah, I know him. Comes in here acting like his shit don't stink, trying to buy property for those luxury condos he's building. Real piece of work." "I need information, Richie. Everything you can find out about him." "What kind of information?" "The kind that might be useful in a divorce proceeding, or just useful in general." Richie grinned, the same expression he'd worn in college when we were planning elaborate pranks on our fraternity brothers. "You want me to call my cousin Vinny? He does private investigation stuff now. Real legitimate operation." "How legitimate?" "Legitimate enough that whatever he finds would hold up in court. Not legitimate enough that he asks too many questions about why you need it." 2 hours later, I was sitting in Vinny Torino's office above a pizza place on Harbor Street. Vinny looked exactly like what you'd expect from a guy named Vinny who ran a PI business above a pizza place, thick around the middle, thinning hair, and the kind of mustache that went out of style in 1987. "So you want me to tail your wife and this Jake character," he said, reviewing the notes I'd given him. "Document the affair, see what else they're up to. Standard cheating spouse package." "How standard is it?" "More standard than you'd think. Millbrook might look like a sleepy coastal town, but people here screw around just like everywhere else. Probably more, actually. Nothing else to do in the winter. I paid Vinny's retainer in cash and drove back to the hotel. My phone had 17 missed calls from Emily and a handful of texts ranging from angry to pleading. I ignored them all and instead called Nina Castellanos, the office manager at Morrison & Associates. "Mark, are you okay? Tom was asking about you this morning." "I'm fine, Nina, just dealing with some personal stuff. Listen, I need a favor, and it might be a little unusual." Nina had worked at the agency for 12 years, long enough to know where all the bodies were buried. More importantly, she'd never liked Emily, though she'd been too professional to say so directly. "What kind of favor?" "I need you to do some research on a local business. Fallon Development Group. Jake Fallon, specifically. Anything you can find. Business filings, permits, complaints, lawsuits. The kind of deep dive we'd do for a competitor analysis." "Is this for a client?" "It's for me. And Nina? I'd prefer if this stayed between us for now." There was a pause. "Mark, are you and Emily having problems?" "We're getting divorced." "Oh, thank God." Her immediate response surprised me. "Excuse me?" "I'm sorry, that came out wrong. I'm not happy you're getting divorced. I'm happy you're finally seeing what the rest of us have seen for years." "Which is?" "That Emily Grafton is a self-centered, manipulative woman who's been making you miserable. I've watched you change over the past few years, Mark. You used to be funny, confident. Lately, you've been walking around like a beaten dog." The conversation stung because it was true. Well, the beaten dog is learning to bite back. "Good. Send me what you need on this Fallon guy. I'll have something for you by tomorrow." That afternoon, I drove to Emily's yoga studio. Zen Harmony occupied a converted Victorian house on Main Street, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood, with inspirational quotes painted on the walls in flowing script. Emily had opened it 3 years ago with money from her parents, turning it into the social hub for Millbrook's upper-middle-class women. I parked across the street and watched the 4 p.m. class through the large front windows. Emily moved through the poses with practiced grace, her voice carrying that soothing tone she used for her students, but rarely for me anymore. Watching her, I could see why Jake was attracted to her. Emily was beautiful, no question about that, but beauty without loyalty was just decoration. After the class ended, I watched Emily's students file out. Among them were Sienna Walsh and Harper Chen, Emily's 2 closest friends and biggest enablers. Sienna was Emily's business partner, a gossipy blonde who taught the morning classes. Harper was a social media influencer with 12,000 Instagram followers and opinions about everything. I waited until Emily locked up the studio, then followed her car at a distance. Instead of heading home, she drove to the Starbucks on Route 1. Through the window, I watched her meet Jake Fallon for the first time in person. Jake was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, artificially tan, wearing the kind of expensive casual clothes that screamed, "I'm successful but approachable." He kissed Emily like they'd been together for years, not months. They sat in a corner booth, heads close together, Emily's hand on his arm. I took photos with my phone, not because I needed evidence, Vinny would provide better documentation, but because I wanted to see them clearly. My wife and her boyfriend, planning their future while I sat in a hotel room eating takeout Chinese food. They talked for an hour. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language told the story. Jake was animated, gesturing with his hands, clearly excited about something. Emily nodded along, occasionally laughing at something he said. At one point, he slid a folder across the table to her. She opened it, smiled, and leaned over to kiss him again. When they finally left, I followed Jake to his office in the new Millbrook Commons development. Fallon Development Group occupied a corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows and a sign that was slightly too large for the space. The kind of place that looks successful from the outside but might be running on fumes. That evening, back at the hotel, I opened my laptop and started researching Jake Fallon the way I'd research a competitor's account. Social media profiles, business records, local news articles, property records. By midnight, I had a clearer picture of Emily's boyfriend. Jake Fallon was leveraged to the hilt. His luxury condo project, Millbrook Harbor Residences, was behind schedule and over budget. He'd borrowed heavily against his other properties to fund the construction, and recent permit delays had put him in a financial bind. The folder he'd shown Emily probably contained marketing materials for the condos, units that needed to sell quickly, or Jake would be in serious trouble. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Grafton, this is Vinny. Got some interesting photos from today. Call me tomorrow." I smiled for the first time since Emily had called me a disappointment. Jake Fallon was about to learn that sometimes the underdog has sharper teeth than expected. Vinny's photos were better than I'd hoped. Professional quality surveillance shots of Emily and Jake at various locations around town, the coffee shop, his office, and most damning, entering and leaving the lakeside resort together on Thursday afternoon while I was supposedly at a client meeting. "Your wife's not very careful," Vinny observed, spreading the prints across his desk. "Most cheaters at least try to be discreet. These two are acting like they're already divorced and remarried." "What about Jake's background?" "That's where it gets interesting." Vinny pulled out a manila folder. "Jake Fallon's got money problems. Big ones. His condo project is bleeding cash, and he's got creditors breathing down his neck. Word is, he needs to pre-sell 60% of the units by Labor Day, or the bank pulls his construction loan." "How many has he sold?" 12%. I whistled low. "So he's desperate. Desperate enough to romance a married woman whose divorce settlement might include enough cash to save his business." The pieces clicked into place. Jake wasn't just having an affair with Emily. He was courting a potential investor. Emily's parents were wealthy, and she'd inherit their construction company eventually. Plus, our house was worth nearly $400,000, and Emily would get half in a divorce. "There's more," Vinny continued. "Jake's got a reputation around town. This isn't his first affair with a married woman. 3 years ago, he was involved with Sandra Morrison, the mayor's wife. That ended when her husband found out and threatened to pull permits for Jake's projects." "Interesting pattern?" "Yeah. Jake Fallon likes other men's wives, especially ones with money or connections. Your Emily fits the profile perfectly." I paid Vinny for the photos and drove to Morrison & Associates to check in with Nina. The advertising agency occupied the second floor of a restored brick building downtown, with views of the harbor and enough creative energy to make even insurance companies seem exciting. "Mark!" Nina looked up from her computer as I walked into her office. "I was wondering when you'd surface. Tom's been asking about you." "Tell him I'll be back Monday. What did you find on Fallon?" Nina handed me a thick folder. "Jake Fallon is what my grandmother would call all hat and no cattle. His company looks successful from the outside, but the financials tell a different story. He's borrowed against everything he owns to fund this condo project, and if it fails, he loses it all." "How do you know about his personal finances?" "Because his business loan application is public record, and his ex-wife filed some very detailed court documents during their divorce 2 years ago. Apparently, Jake has a gambling problem and a tendency to make risky investments with other people's money." "Other people's money?" "His ex-wife accused him of using her inheritance to cover business losses. She also mentioned his pattern of inappropriate relationships with married clients." The judge wasn't impressed. I flipped through the documents Nina had compiled. Jake Fallon wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator who targeted vulnerable married women for financial gain. Emily might think she was having a romantic affair, but she was actually being set up for a con. "Nina, you're amazing. How can I repay you for this?" "By not letting that woman take you for everything you're worth in the divorce. Emily Grafton has been treating you like garbage for years, and everyone in town knows it except you." "Everyone knows?" "Mark, you're a good guy. People notice when good guys are being mistreated. Emily's reputation around town isn't nearly as sterling as she thinks it is." That afternoon, I decided it was time to test the waters. I drove to Zen Harmony during Emily's 5 p.m. class and walked inside like I belonged there. The receptionist, a young woman named Crystal, looked surprised to see me. "Oh, hi, Mr. Grafton. Are you here for Emily?" "Actually, I was thinking about trying a class. Is that weird?" "Not at all. Lots of couples do yoga together. Emily's almost finished with the evening session. You could join the cool down if you want." I walked into the main studio, where Emily was leading 15 women through a series of stretching poses. The room smelled like lavender and expensive perfume. Emily's voice carried that serene, instructional tone that I'd once found attractive but now recognized as performance. "Remember to breathe into the pose," she was saying. "Let go of the stress and tension from your day." She spotted me in the doorway and nearly lost her balance. The serene expression flickered for just a moment before she recovered. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my husband, Mark. He's decided to join us for our final meditation." The women turned to look at me with varying degrees of curiosity and sympathy. I recognized most of them. Millbrook was a small town, and these were the wives of lawyers, doctors, and business owners, women who lunched together and gossiped about everyone else's marriages. "Hi, ladies," I said, settling onto a yoga mat in the back row. "Emily's been telling me how relaxing this is. Thought I'd see what all the fuss is about." I caught Sienna and Harper exchanging glances. They knew about the affair. I was certain of it. Emily's friends always knew everything. Emily led us through 10 minutes of meditation, her voice slightly strained. When the class ended, the other women filtered out with polite goodbyes, leaving me alone with Emily, Sienna, and Harper. "Mark, what are you doing here?" Emily's serene mask had completely slipped. "I told you. I wanted to try yoga. You've been so passionate about it lately, staying late for classes, weekend workshops, private sessions." I let the words hang in the air. "I figured I should see what's keeping you so busy." Sienna jumped in. "Emily's been working really hard to build the business. We both have. It takes dedication." "I'm sure it does. All those evening appointments, weekend retreats, it must be exhausting." I looked directly at Emily. "When do you find time to relax?" "We should go," Harper said quickly. "Emily, didn't you say you had dinner plans?" "Actually," I said, "I was hoping Emily and I could grab dinner together. We have a lot to talk about." Emily's face went pale. "Mark, I can't tonight. I have plans." "With Jake?" The silence in the room was deafening. Sienna's mouth actually fell open. Harper looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "I don't know what you're talking about," Emily said, but her voice shook. I pulled out my phone and showed her one of Vinny's photos, Emily and Jake kissing in the Starbucks parking lot. "This Jake, your business consultant, right? That's what you told me he was when I asked about the BMW in our driveway last month." Emily stared at the photo, her face cycling through shock, anger, and something that might have been relief. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." I put the phone away. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Sienna and Harper were edging toward the door, clearly wanting to escape the confrontation. I turned to them before they could leave. "Ladies, since you're Emily's closest friends, I'm sure you've been very supportive during this difficult time, helping her work through her feelings, maybe covering for her when she needed alibis." "Mark, don't," Emily warned. "Don't what?" "Don't acknowledge that my wife has been having an affair with Jake Fallon for months? Don't mention that her best friends have been helping her lie to me? Or don't point out that Jake Fallon is a broke con artist who's probably planning to use Emily's divorce settlement to save his failing business?" Harper's eyes widened. "What do you mean, con artist?" I looked at Emily. "You didn't tell them about Jake's financial problems? His pattern of affairs with married women? The fact that he's about to lose everything unless he finds an investor?" Emily's face crumpled. "That's not... Jake loves me. This isn't about money." "Emily," I said gently, Jake Fallon has done this before. Ask Sandra Morrison. The name hit Emily like a slap. Sandra Morrison's affair had been the scandal of the previous summer, whispered about at every social gathering until the next drama took its place. "You're lying," Emily whispered. "I wish I was." I pulled out the folder Nina had prepared. Jake's ex-wife documented everything in their divorce proceedings. The gambling, the debts, the affairs with married clients. "You're not his first mark, Em. You're just his latest." I left the folder on the reception desk and walked toward the door. "When you're ready to have an honest conversation about our marriage, call me. But first, you might want to ask Jake about Sandra Morrison and about his business loan that's due in 6 weeks." Outside, I sat in my car for a few minutes, watching through the studio windows as Emily, Sienna, and Harper huddled around the folder I'd left behind. Emily was crying. Sienna was reading the documents with growing alarm. Harper was already on her phone, probably Googling Jake Fallon's name. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "We need to talk." I typed back, "I'm at the Driftwood Inn, room 237. But Emily? Come alone." Emily arrived at my hotel room an hour later, her eyes red from crying and her usual composure completely shattered. She'd traded her yoga instructor serenity for raw desperation, and it wasn't a good look on her. "Is it true?" she asked before I'd even closed the door. "About Jake and Sandra Morrison?" "It's true. It's all true." I gestured to the chair by the window. "Sit down, Em. We need to have the conversation we should have had months ago." She perched on the edge of the chair like she might bolt at any moment. I didn't know about his financial problems. He told me his business was thriving. Jake Fallon is very good at telling people what they want to hear. It's how he's managed to stay afloat this long. "But he loves me, Mark." "I know he does." I sat on the bed across from her, close enough to see the doubt creeping into her eyes. "Emily, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to really think about the answer. When did Jake start pursuing you?" "What do you mean?" "When did he first approach you? Was it before or after your parents mentioned they were updating their will?" Emily's face went white. "How do you know about that?" "Because your mother called the house last month looking for you. She was excited about the changes to the will, wanted to discuss how inheriting the construction company would affect our taxes." I leaned forward. "That conversation happened on a Tuesday. According to your text messages, Jake first asked you out on Thursday." That's a coincidence. Is it? Or did Jake hear through the local business network that Emily Grafton was about to inherit a multi-million-dollar construction company? Emily stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "You went through my phone. I found your second phone, the one you used to coordinate your affair." I kept my voice calm, factual. "Emily, I've seen the messages, all of them, including the ones where you and Jake discuss using our joint savings account as a down payment for one of his condos." She spun around. "That was just talk. We weren't actually going to—" "Weren't you?" "Because according to the bank records I pulled yesterday, someone tried to transfer $50,000 from our savings to an account belonging to Fallon Development Group. The transfer was blocked because it required both our signatures." Emily sank back into the chair, her face in her hands. Oh God, what have I done?" "You fell for a con, Em. A very sophisticated, very personal con designed specifically for you." I pulled out my laptop and showed her the research Nina had compiled. "Jake Fallon targets married women with money or connections. He romances them, convinces them their husbands don't appreciate them, then positions himself as the perfect alternative. The affair isn't the goal, the financial access is." Emily scrolled through the documents, her expression growing more horrified with each page. "Sandra Morrison invested in his previous project? $200,000. Money she never got back when the project failed. And his ex-wife? Lost her entire inheritance covering Jake's gambling debts and business losses. Emily closed the laptop and looked at me with something approaching her old self. Mark, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? She was quiet for a long moment. I felt invisible, Mark. Like I was just part of the furniture in our life. Jake made me feel special, desired, like I mattered. You did matter, Em. You mattered to me. Did I? Because for the past 2 years, it felt like you were just going through the motions. Work, dinner, TV, bed, repeat. I felt like I was dying of boredom. Her words stung because they contained a grain of truth. Our marriage had fallen into a routine, comfortable but passionless. But that didn't justify what she'd done. So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to have an affair with a con artist. I didn't know he was a con artist. I thought he was successful, charming, interested in me for me. And now? Emily was crying again, but quietly this time. Now I feel like an idiot. Sienna and Harper are furious with me for dragging them into this mess. My parents are going to be devastated when they find out. And I've destroyed our marriage for a man who was only using me. I felt a flicker of sympathy for her, but it was quickly overwhelmed by anger at the months of lies and manipulation. Emily, I need to ask you something else, and I need you to be completely honest. Have you given Jake any money, signed any documents, made any commitments? I signed a purchase agreement for one of the condos. Jake said it would be a good investment and we could use it as our place after the divorce. How much? The down payment was $50,000. The full price is $420,000. I did the math quickly. That condo is worth maybe $250,000 in the current market. Jake was selling you a unit for almost double its actual value. That can't be right. I showed her the comparable property values Nina had researched. Jake was planning to use your money to cover his construction costs, then sell you an overpriced unit that you'd never be able to resell without taking a massive loss. You would have been trapped in a bad investment with a man who was systematically stealing from you. Emily stared at the numbers, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and humiliation. He played me completely, didn't he? From the very beginning. What do I do now, Mark? How do I fix this? That was the question I'd been waiting for. First, you're going to call the bank and formally cancel any pending transfers to Jake's accounts. Then you're going to retrieve that purchase agreement and any other documents you signed. And then what? I smiled for the first time in days. Then we're going to teach Jake Fallon what happens when he messes with the wrong family. Emily looked confused. We? Jake Fallon didn't just con you. He conned both of us. He inserted himself into our marriage, manipulated our problems, and tried to steal our money. This isn't just about your affair anymore. This is about a predator who needs to be stopped before he does this to someone else. What are you proposing? I'm proposing that we give Jake Fallon exactly what he deserves. But I need to know, are you with me, or are you still holding out hope that this was all some big misunderstanding? Emily was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the harbor lights. Finally, she looked back at me with something I hadn't seen in her eyes for months. Determination. What do you need me to do? The plan we hatched over the next 3 days was elegant in its simplicity. Emily would continue her relationship with Jake, but now she'd be feeding him information that I provided. Meanwhile, I'd work behind the scenes to ensure that Jake's web of lies unraveled in the most public and humiliating way possible. You want me to invite him to dinner? Emily asked, as we sat in my hotel room, planning Jake's downfall. At our house? Not just dinner. A celebration dinner. Tell him you've convinced me to invest in his condo project. Mark, he'll never believe that. He will if you sell it right. Tell him you showed me the financials, convinced me it was a smart investment opportunity. Jake's desperate enough that he'll believe what he wants to believe. Emily nodded slowly. And then what? Then we spring the trap. I'd spent the morning coordinating with Richie, Nina, and Vinny. Each of them had a role to play in what I'd started thinking of as the Jake Fallon farewell tour. But the centerpiece would be the dinner party at our house on Friday night. "Who else are we inviting?" Emily asked. "Sienna and Harper, obviously. They need to see how this ends. And I thought we'd invite Tom Morrison from my office." "The mayor's son? Why?" "Because Tom's mother was Sandra Morrison, the last married woman Jake conned. I think Tom would be very interested to meet his mother's former business partner." Emily's eyes widened. "Mark, that's cruel?" "Maybe. But Jake Fallon has been cruel to a lot of people. It's time for some consequences." Friday evening arrived with perfect weather. Warm and clear, ideal for the kind of dinner party that would be talked about in Millbrook for years to come. Emily had prepared Jake's favorite meal, set the dining room table with our good china, and even bought flowers for the centerpiece. To any outside observer, it looked like a celebration. Jake arrived first, carrying a bottle of expensive wine and wearing the kind of confident smile that suggested he thought he'd finally hit the jackpot. He kissed Emily like they were already married, then shook my hand with the enthusiasm of a man who believed he'd successfully manipulated his way to financial security. "Mark, I have to say I'm impressed. Emily told me you'd come around on the investment opportunity, but I wasn't sure you'd see the potential." "Well, Jake, Emily can be very persuasive when she wants to be." I smiled and poured him a glass of wine. "She showed me all your materials, and I have to admit, the numbers look impressive. The Millbrook Harbor residences are going to transform this town. Luxury living right on the water with all the amenities modern buyers expect. We're not just building condos, we're building a lifestyle." Sienna and Harper arrived next, both looking uncomfortable but curious about why they'd been invited to what Emily had described as a reconciliation dinner. Tom Morrison came last, and I watched Jake's face carefully when Emily introduced him. "Tom Morrison," Jake repeated, shaking Tom's hand. "Morrison. That name sounds familiar. You might know my mother, Sandra Morrison. She's done some real estate investing around town." Jake's smile flickered for just a moment. "Sandra Morrison. Yes, of course. Lovely woman." "She speaks very highly of you, too," Tom said dryly. "In fact, she had quite a lot to say about your business practices." The conversation moved to the dining room, where Emily served dinner with the kind of gracious hospitality she'd perfected over years of entertaining. Jake regaled the table with stories about his various projects, his vision for Millbrook's development, and his excitement about partnering with forward-thinking investors like Mark and Emily. "So, Jake," I said as Emily served dessert, "I've been curious about something. Emily mentioned that you've worked with other married couples on investment opportunities. How do you typically structure those partnerships?" "Well, every situation is unique, of course. I try to work with each couple's specific financial situation and goals." "Like you did with Sandra Morrison?" The table went quiet. Jake's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Tom leaned forward. "Yes, Jake. I'd love to hear about how you structured that partnership, especially the part where my mother lost $200,000. Jake's face went pale, but he tried to maintain his composure. "Tom, I think there might be some misunderstanding about that situation. Your mother's investment was in a different project, one that unfortunately faced some unexpected challenges." "Unexpected challenges like you gambling away the construction funds in Atlantic City?" Emily gasped. Sienna and Harper exchanged shocked glances. Jake looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. "I think there's been some miscommunication here," Jake said, standing up from the table. "Mark, Emily, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Sit down, Jake." My voice carried enough authority that he actually obeyed. "We're all friends here. No need for privacy." I pulled out the folder of documents Nina had prepared and spread them across the table. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present the true financial picture of Jake Fallon and Fallon Development Group. What followed was a methodical destruction of Jake's carefully constructed facade. Bank records showing his mounting debts, court documents from his divorce detailing his gambling addiction and history of financial manipulation, testimony from Sandra Morrison's lawsuit describing how Jake had seduced her, gained access to her finances, and then disappeared when the money ran out. "This is harassment," Jake said, but his voice shook. "You can't just what? Tell the truth?" I looked around the table at the shocked faces of Emily's friends. Jake Fallon is a con artist who targets married women with money. He identifies their vulnerabilities, exploits their marital problems, and then positions himself as the solution to all their problems. The affair is just the hook. The real goal is financial access. Emily spoke up, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Jake, is it true? About Sandra Morrison? About your gambling?" Jake looked at her with something approaching desperation. "Emily, you have to understand. That was a different time in my life. I've changed. What we have is real." "What we have," Emily interrupted, "is a lie. All of it. The romance, the business opportunity, the future you promised me. It was all designed to get access to my money." Tom Morrison stood up, his face hard with anger. "Jake, you destroyed my parents' marriage. My mother still hasn't recovered from what you did to her. And now you're doing it again?" I said calmly, "that Jake should leave now. Don't you, Jake?" Jake looked around the table at the hostile faces surrounding him. His confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by the desperate panic of a cornered animal. "This isn't over," he said, grabbing his jacket from the back of his chair. "You people have no idea what you're dealing with." "Actually, we know exactly what we're dealing with," I replied. "A broke con artist who's about to lose everything. Again." Jake stormed out, slamming the front door behind him. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of his BMW peeling out of our driveway. "Well," Harper said finally. That was intense. Tom Morrison looked at Emily with something approaching sympathy. "Mrs. Grafton, I'm sorry you got caught up in Jake's schemes, but I'm glad you found out before he took you for everything you're worth." After our guests left, Emily and I sat in the living room, exhausted by the evening's drama. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now Jake Fallon leaves town, hopefully before he can hurt anyone else. His business is finished. Word will be all over Millbrook by tomorrow morning. No one will invest with him, no one will work with him, and no one will trust him." "I meant, what happens with us?" I looked at my wife, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She looked older, worn down by the stress of the affair and its aftermath. But there was also something clearer in her expression, like a fog had lifted. "I don't know, Em. We've both said and done things that can't be taken back. The trust is gone, maybe permanently. Do you think we could try counseling again? Real counseling this time, not the performance we were putting on before?" I considered her question carefully. "Maybe. But first, you need to understand something. I'm not the same man who walked out of Dr. Young's office last week. I'm not going to be a doormat anymore, Em. I'm not going to accept being treated like a disappointment in my own marriage." "I know, and I'm not the same woman who said those things to you. Jake showed me what it feels like to be manipulated and used. I never want to make anyone feel that way again." "It's going to take time, Emily, a lot of time." "I know. But Mark, thank you. For saving me from making the biggest mistake of my life, for protecting our family's money, for caring enough to fight for me even after I'd given up on us." I reached over and took her hand. "We'll see, Em. We'll see." 3 months later, Jake Fallon's half-finished condo project was sold at auction to cover his debts. He left Millbrook the day after our dinner party and, according to Richie's sources, was last seen in Florida trying to convince elderly retirees to invest in a timeshare scheme. Emily and I started counseling again, this time with a different therapist and a commitment to complete honesty. It wasn't easy, rebuilding trust never is, but we were both working at it. The biggest change was in how people around town treated me. Word had spread about how I'd exposed Jake Fallon, and suddenly I wasn't just Emily's husband anymore. I was the guy who'd taken down a con artist and protected his family. It felt good to be respected instead of pitied. Emily's yoga studio survived the scandal, though she lost some clients who disapproved of her affair. She used the experience to develop a new class series about authentic living and learning from mistakes. It was popular with divorced women and others who'd made major life changes. As for our marriage, we were taking it one day at a time. Some days were better than others, but we were both trying, and that was more than we'd done in years. The last I heard about Jake Fallon, he was facing fraud charges in Miami. Apparently, he'd tried his married woman con on the wrong target, the wife of a federal prosecutor. Some people never learn. But I had learned something important from the whole experience. Being called a disappointment isn't the end of the world. Sometimes it's just the beginning of becoming someone better.